Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to a somber and exciting day here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast as we get to the final roster cut down here on Tuesday, and of course the initial 53-man roster. Always a bittersweet time of year. This is unfortunately where the NFL dream will end for a lot of these undrafted free agents, and also of course veterans and a lot of guys. You know, the Falcons made like 26 cuts today, something like that. So tough stuff. Definitely a little bit of a depressing topic there, but also some triumphs always. Some guys that were able to make the roster that we weren't expecting. So lots to talk about there. We'll talk about the initial 53-man roster. Remember, they're probably going to make even more changes after this. So we'll see what happens there. We'll talk about where I expect some of those changes to happen, where I expect some of the shuffling to be on this initial roster. But, you know, immediate takeaway, I think it's pretty good. We will obviously discuss in more detail the couple of surprises and little things as we get through today's show. Real quick, before we dive in, I want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. The NFL preseason has mercifully ended, but college has kicked off. There's going to be more college this week and the little bit of lull we have here until NFL Week 1. And then when NFL Week 1 rolls around, you know where to go. Bet Online. They've got every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. If you think you know your stuff, you can get in on Bet Online's winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. And when the game's over, folks, head on over to BetOnline's online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of their over 150 slots games. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today, BetOnline, and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. So lots to get to on today's program. We'll go over the cuts, go over the guys who made it, and we will dive in. So let's just get started on the offensive side. You guys heard my most recent roster prediction, and also, you know, I put out a new one on Twitter that was like some slight tweaks, and it's pretty close to what I had at the end of the day. It's pretty much what I predicted. There's a couple of changes on here. We'll get to a couple of notable differences. But to start things off at quarterback, it is going to be three quarterbacks. I know everyone was kind of waiting with bated breath to see if the Falcons would move Taylor Heinicke, could move Taylor Heinicke. You know, something could still happen there. We'll see. But at the moment, it's going to be three quarterbacks: Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix Jr., not at all surprising. Taylor Heinicke, mildly surprising. But again, the cap savings with Heinicke was minimal. It was just over $1 million. And it's you know, it's not a lot. There's not really any reason that you had to do that. And it might be that they're going to hold him and hope they can flip him later in the season, or they really do want the veteran presence in there. And, you know, whatever it is, that's the decision they've gone with. Not shocking. I figured they'd keep three unless there was somebody. There could be a move there, right? If they find somebody they really like on the waiver wire. You know, I know Nate Sudfeld got waived. Maybe they want some to go more that direction. We'll see. But yeah. That's the quarterback situation. At running back, again, this one, the final spot was a bit of a toss-up. Shouldn't have changed my answer from my, final podcast roster projection, because it is Jace McClellan that makes it as the fourth guy. Obviously, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier at the top end, as I've been saying all offseason. Avery Williams here as the as one of the return specialists. So not terribly surprising to see that. Again, I think it was a bit of a toss-up between him and Carlos Washington. But again, with Jace being the rookie, I think it makes sense that they do decide to just go with the guy they drafted, especially considering since Washington wasn't overly impressive in the preseason. So good for Jace Jaceris, first of his name. We'll see if he can get a little bit healthier, get a little bit more time with the team, because again, he was dealing with injury for basically the entirety of the summer before training camp. Next position to get to, wide receiver, and this was the first mild surprise here where the Falcons only keep 5 receivers. And again, that is sort of a little bit unexpected, but I think First of all, the 5 receivers that do make the roster, none of these are surprises. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, the top 3 we pretty much had written down in Sharpie. Casey Washington does make the roster, the rookie, so good for him. Again, not surprising. He was having a very strong camp in preseason. And then Kaderil Hodge, the special teams ace, is also making the cut in the top 5 receivers. Now, I think we all thought Chris Blair would probably get the 6th spot since he did have a pretty good preseason. It seems like there's probably a move in the works in terms of wide receiver. That's why the Falcons didn't keep a 6th guy here. I do believe they'll probably want to carry 6 into the season. So I'm wondering, where that move will come, like where else on the roster they'll sort of make that move. But I do think, like Noah Brown, I would love to add him to this group, but he's going to have a lot of suitors, so I wouldn't get your hopes up too much about that. But Ben Skronik was waived by the Texans as well, so he could be someone. Obviously, he's got a lot of experience with this coaching staff, great special teams player, very good in this scheme that are very similar to the scheme they're going to run. So those are the 2 guys I would circle. Noah Brown, if they're really looking for someone to sort of push the depth, like you push Ray McLeod potentially for wide receiver 3 and just upgrade the top end of the depth chart. If they can't get him, maybe someone like Ben Skronik as another guy that can compete for that wide receiver 4 role, and also, of course, give you that really good special teams play. Then at tight end, again, not really any surprises here, right? Kyle Pitts, Charlie Werner, 2 guys, again, set in stone. And Ross Dwelley looked like he had really taken control of that 3rd tight end spot. The only question was, would they try to keep a 4th tight end like a John Fitzpatrick if they're going to run more tight ends? So far, no. They're just going with the 3. Again, not really a whole lot here. Ross Dwelley had kind of clearly pulled ahead of John Fitzpatrick over the course of camp, and that ends up standing up on the final roster cuts here. Offensive tackle, just like my prediction, the Falcons do go with just 3 offensive tackles here, although that's a little bit perhaps of a misnomer because Kyle Hinton, who does also make the roster in the center, like interior offensive line group, he does have some experience at tackles. He could be an emergency tackle, and you're only activating 8 offensive linemen anyway on game day, so it's not like that extra tackle would be able to help you out in a pinch on game day. So it's Jake Matthews at left tackle, Caleb Gary at right tackle, and then Storm Norton, the swing tackle. So 3 guys from last year. No surprises there. On the interior, a little bit more interesting. They end up keeping 6 interior offensive linemen. I think this is likely to be where the cut comes for a potential wide receiver addition. But for now, the Falcons do keep, of course, Chris Lindstrom, Matthew Bergeron, and Drew Dahlman as the starters, and then the top 2 reserves, Ryan Newsel and Kyle Hinton. And then for now, rookie Javon Gwynn does make the 53-man roster. Again, I think he's probably the cut candidate if the Falcons are adding a wide receiver to this group. But I think they would like to keep him on the practice squad. He's kind of the 3rd center, the extra interior guy. So I think he's likely to stick around. But for now, he does make the roster. So congratulations to him. Then on the defensive side, it's 26, just like I said. But we immediately have a bit of a surprise here. On the edge, we do, of course, have Matthew Judon, Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie, and James Smith-Williams, sort of the 4 guys I think everyone had penciled in. But D'Angelo Malone does make the roster as the extra edge guy, presumably due to his performance on special teams. And again, special teams for these end-of-roster guys is a critical factor. Malone was arguably the best special teams player in Atlanta so far, like through the course of the preseason. He didn't do a whole lot in terms of, defense, but maybe I still think he's a guy that you can sort of mold into that like Caden Ellis role as more of like a inside linebacker, outside linebacker hybrid. Maybe they'll be able to explore that a little bit more. But he does make the roster for now. And I think that, congratulations to Malone. I think he made this roster on the back of his special teams play. He's clearly been putting in a ton of work there. It's an underrated part of training camp. It's an underrated part of the preseason, but these are the things that make the roster. And I think that has been key for Malone. We'll see, of course, if he sticks around over the next week. But for now, great job from Malone to at least make the initial 53. Congratulations to him. And then again, it's a thick interior group, and I mean that in figuratively and a literal sense. 8 interior linemen on this roster. That means the Falcons are keeping 13 total defensive linemen if you count all the edge rusher, outside linebacker types. Pretty crazy stuff there. Obviously, Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, Zach Harrison, Taquan Graham, all the starters, quote unquote, that we were seeing. All those guys, of course, in here, written in Sharpie. The 2 rookies, of course, as well, Enrook Arororo and Brandon Dorless. No surprises there. It would have been shocking to see those guys cut. Also, just like this group basically turned out exactly like I said. They also keep Eddie Goldman as their nose tackle, and then veteran Kentavious Street, who is just a good rotational guy. So good for Street, good for the rookies. Obviously, we do have to say goodbye to 2 guys that I think were pretty good contributors. Lakeil London obviously was a big contributor last year. That's a tough cut. Rookie Zion Logue also ends up getting cut. It was going to be really hard for him to make it with Eddie Goldman coming back and playing well. We lost Tommy Togiai as well, who was having a strong preseason. So 3 tough cuts there on the interior for the Falcons. That is a stacked group of 8. I hope it translates to game day because that is a good group. And I do wonder if we're going to start out the season with both Ruka Roro and Brandon Dorless inactive, just because the group ahead of them is more polished and more ready to play immediately. So I'm curious to see. Both of those guys, again, are future-focused picks. Obviously, be disappointed to have your second-round pick inactive to start the season, but it's not necessarily because Rook is bad. I think it's because the guys in front of him on this depth chart are just so good. So we may be able to sort of let those guys sit and develop for a little bit before having to throw them into the fire. All right, linebacker. No surprises here. This one's pretty cut and dry, right? 4 linebackers, Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, and Nate Landman are the guys that make this roster, as well as rookie J.D. Bertrand. So these were the guys I think everyone had written down. Nothing surprising here. And again, I think all those guys earned their spots and they're deserved, and we'll just hope that everyone's healthy for week 1. I know Caden Ellis and Nate Landman were dealing with day-to-day injuries, so that doesn't seem to put their return for week 1 in any sort of jeopardy. But again, we'll continue to monitor that. But there's good depth, right? We got Troy Anderson, we got J.D. Bertrand. So, if one of those guys had to miss time, probably not a huge deal. But we'll hope to be full strength for week 1, certainly. Now we got cornerback. Only 5 corners make it. I was expecting this to be more like 6. I thought we'd see Kevin King or possibly Natrone Brooks sneak in here. Those guys are both waived, cut. So it's only going to be the 5 corners. Again, the top 4. The top 5, honestly, not surprising. I think all these guys you should have written in pen. AJ Terrell, Mike Hughes, D. Alford, Clark Phillips, the 3rd, and Antonio Hamilton. That's a strong 5. I do think, obviously, number 2 corner is still kind of like, what are we going to get? Like, is it going to be good enough? But I think as like a total depth chart, it's a good group. So if one of these guys can emerge as a quality corner 2, then I think the Falcons are in pretty good shape on the defensive side of the ball. A little bit surprised we didn't see Kevin King make it. Obviously, he's going to be a priority practice squad guy, but doesn't end up making the cut here. So tough. And Natrone Brooks too. I think they're going to really prioritize those 2 guys coming back on the squad, and we'll just see if they can make it happen. But I think they'd like to have those guys back, certainly. And then at safety, it is the 4 safeties I've projected. Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons, obviously. Richie Grant does make it. I know there were some questions like, oh, he's got that big cap hit. Is he going to be a cap casualty? Nope, Richie Grant is here. The coaching staff does seem to actually like him. And then Micah Abernathy, who, again, I think is a good special teamer. Better defensive player than Dan Cruikshank, who he beats out. And we do see DeMarco Helms placed on IR, designated to return, so he's on that short-term IR. So that puts him out at least, I believe, a month and a half or so. We'll see when he's ready to return, but not season-ending IR for DeMarco Helms. He is put on IR, so he probably eventually takes Micah Abernathy's place at some point this year. We'll hope for sooner rather than later, but until then, we'll just have to kind of cross our fingers and hope for the best. And yeah, that leaves a lot of tough cuts. We did also see linebacker Milo Eifler and safety Josh Thompson waived injured. So if they clear waivers, they could end up on IR. We also, of course, see some tough cuts, like some surprising cuts here. And, I think ultimately, Chris Blair is probably the biggest one. Natrone Brooks and Kevin King at corner. pretty big. And again, it sucks to lose Zion Logan and Hale London potentially. But ultimately, I mean, I think you like the way that this group looks. I think you're pretty happy with the way this roster has shook out. I think you like what you've seen from the interior. Obviously, the edge group looks so much better with Matthew Judon in it. The safety room looks so much better with Justin Simmons in it. And I think the 5 deep at corner is a good 5 deep. I think you'd like to make an upgrade at corner too, but that's just not in the cards right now, it seems. The one spot that I would really keep, there's 2 spots really I would keep eyes on, and that would be wide receiver. I mentioned Noah Brown, Ben Skronik. There's a lot of guys that just got cut. I haven't had a chance to look through all of them yet. I wanted to get this out to you guys as fast as I could, but ultimately, there's going to be, probably a bit of a frenzy with these wide receivers. I think Noah Brown's going to be one of the top guys. He's probably going to have decent offers from several teams. If the Falcons can get him in here, I think that would be huge. This is a guy that's had 500 yards and multiple touchdowns each of the last 2 years. He's a quality wide receiver 3. Love to get him in here. Not necessarily he's gonna supplant Ray McCloud. I don't think Ray McCloud is just being uselessly hyped up and that he's gonna be a bad wide receiver 3. I think he'll be a fine receiver 3, but not a needle mover. I think Noah Brown has the potential to be a little bit more of a needle mover there. And I think just even if he's not going to start, getting that upgrade to your wide receiver depth, if Noah Brown has to come in for somebody like Drake London, for example, I think he would be a very interesting Drake London sort of understudy replacement type of guy if London has to miss any snaps. Noah Brown has a history of production. He's got great size. So I think that's a good spot, obviously, for him to be a backup for London. A backup for Drake London is what I was trying to say. Kind of all jumbled together there. But yeah, ultimately, I think, quarterback 3 as well, right? This Taylor Heineke, I don't believe he's safe, but I wouldn't necessarily expect a move here if they do have a quarterback they really like on the waiver wire. I mentioned Nate Sudfeld, but there's going to be other guys. I know Tim Boyle was cut, whatever. It's possible that the Falcons find someone else out there that they like better and just move on from Heineke. If not, I wouldn't be surprised if they just hold him, maybe hope to trade him later for a late day 3 pick to someone who really needs a quarterback later on. It doesn't seem like the move, the opportunity was there right now to make that trade. Not terribly surprising. I mean, most teams obviously are healthy right now, so nobody's really desperate enough. So the trade deadline might be another time where we're sort of interested in seeing if Heineke gets moved. But I think the roster, top to bottom, solid. Better than solid in a lot of areas for once. Again, you love the interior defensive line. I think linebacker is really underrated. I think the 5 deep at corner is actually strong. I think they might have trouble matching up against the best and deepest passing games in the NFL. But I think against middling or worse passing games, I think they'll actually be pretty good. I think you can trust Mike Hughes / Clark Phillips / Antonio Hamilton, whoever ends up shaking out there over the course of the season, to cover decent wide receiver 2s. But it's the teams like the Eagles in week 2, I think it's going to be a little dicier, right? Covering Devontae Smith and stuff like that. But I think against the non-top end deep wide receiver rooms, this secondary will be fine, especially the cornerbacks will be fine. They've got great safety play behind them. I think they'll be able to weather it, and it helps now that your edge group isn't just a disaster. You got Judon. You have Ebiketie, who, to his credit, in practice, I think since his struggles early in the preseason, has been lighting it up at practice. He's been getting better. He's going to be a designated pass rusher. They're not going to put him out here. They're not going to put him out there to stop the run. I think they know okay, he's not going to be able to do that. We can't trust him to play the run, but he's a good designated pass rusher. We'll have him out there as a rotational guy. And I think, one thing that I haven't really talked about on the show that I do want to mention, I think this is potentially an elite run defense. I think they're really invested in that. Putting teams in 3rd and long is what they want. They want teams put in 3rd and long by stopping the run early. And when teams get in 3rd and long, they want to take the ball away. They want teams to have difficult situations where they're forced to either check it down or put the ball in harm's way. And I think with Justin Simmons here, it's going to be really dangerous to throw over the middle of the field on this team with Jesse Bates in one layer and Justin Simmons in the other. This is going to be a dangerous team to throw over the middle on. And yeah, I'm excited to see it. I think especially the run defense will be potentially elite. I know we heard like the Falcons' run game was having a lot of struggles in practice, against itself, like against the defense. And I think that's because the run defense is really good. Like I think the run defense is going to be really, really good. So I'm excited to see that too. It's kind of the underloved part of defense, but I think it's important, especially week one. Falcons are going to get a huge test against the Steelers, who are going to try to pound the rock as much as possible. We know Arthur Smith. We know their quarterback and offensive line protection problems. They're going to try to pound that rock, and if they can do it, the Falcons are going to have their hands full with that. Obviously, that's kind of Arthur Smith's MO, right? If he can run the ball well, looks great. If he can't, it looks terrible. So that's going to be one of the keys to that game. We're going to have one of the guys from Believe in Steelers, Mark Bergen, joining us next week to break down that game and that matchup for week one. And then, but back to the roster. Offensively, I think obviously quarterback is just such a massive upgrade from 2023. I don't think you can really, like make any bigger of a deal of that than possible. Like I think it's going to be huge just in general. And yeah, the wide receiver depth isn't great. So we're going to need, some luck there. But I think you look, and there's, again, like there are stars at all levels of this offense. You've got Kirk, you've got Bijan, you've got Drake London, you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got several very good offensive linemen. It's not like wide receivers, you're just blown away with the talent there, but I think Darnell Mooney is a very good I think he's a capable wide receiver too. And, Ray McLeod may not actually play that much because I think we're going to see Kyle Pitts and Charlie Werner out there as like the base package. Like it'll technically be 12 personnel as the base. I said this on a podcast earlier today. I think the Falcons are lying to people with their preseason deployment. I believe the Falcons are going to play a lot of 12. This is not a joke, but it's really going to look like 11 because Kyle Pitts is probably going to be a slot receiver most of the time. And they're going to move him around and do all kinds of crazy stuff, but he's not going to be asked to block because Charlie Werner is going to be the inline tight end. He's going to be blocking, and they're going to play out of that. So it's going to funny enough, it's going to be like, oh wow, it's like Arthur Smith with this 12 personnel everywhere, but really it's more like 11 functionally. And I think it's actually, this is what Arthur Smith probably was hoping to do, which is confuse teams with this 12 personnel, put them in tough spots. Hopefully the way Zach Robinson's going to deploy it, it's actually going to work instead of just cluing teams into that we're just going to pound the rock and that's all we can do. Obviously the Falcons hoping for a little bit more passing type stuff, right? With the better quarterback play, better receivers, and I think hopefully Kyle Pitts back to full health too. And I'm excited to see this offense. But think about what we saw in the preseason: only fade routes in the red zone. That's not going to happen. Very little motion or pre-snap motion. That less, not very much play action. Like that's all stuff that I think is not likely to continue. I think we're going to see a ton of motion, a lot of 12 personnel. So don't trust what you've seen in the preseason. I think the Falcons are intentionally using that to try to make teams think this is going to be the Rams. Like, oh, we're going to play 11 all the time. And like, this is what we're going to do. So teams are going to, I think the Steelers are going to be really confused about, are we actually going to prepare for like 90 something % of 11 personnel, or are we going to try to anticipate 12? They're going to have to prepare for both. So, I think they're going to try, like they've been very tight-lipped with this offense. They've shown really nothing about their plans in the preseason. They've been very, of course, tight-lipped with coverage in training camp as well. So, hopefully it translates to them getting the drop on a few teams to start the season because they're going to need all the help they can get against that gauntlet over the first 3 games. But ultimately, yeah, I like this roster. I like how it's been constructed. Now you got to go out and win games. You got to translate the good roster building, the positive press, the good vibes from all of training camp and all this stuff. You got to translate that to the football field because we've been sold on good vibes and some bad vibes too, obviously, over the last couple of years. And it hasn't translated. It's been 7-10, 3 straight years. This team has not made the playoffs in 7 years. So it's time for the rubber to meet the road. It's time to actually start winning some football games. And as much as we can see, I believe they're set up to do that. I believe that this team is set up for 11 wins, possibly more if they get it together, maybe a little bit less, but I think anything less than double digit wins would be disappointing with this schedule, with the state of the NFC South as it is. it's time to get it done. No more excuses, no more rebuilding. Let's get it done. And I think they've set themselves up well, and we'll see what other changes occur before week 1. But very exciting time, guys. Not much longer now until the regular season kicks off. So we are almost there. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm Kevin at Falcoholic Kevin. Please like, subscribe, leave us that 5-star review in your podcast platform of choice. Check out thefalcoholic.com for all that great written content coming out. If you want to support the show, we love it. Please check out the Patreon. If you're a podcast listener, check out the YouTube channel memberships if you're more of a video enjoyer. Some perks there for everyone. We appreciate your support. Thank you guys so much. We will be back. It'll be a little bit of a slow week this week. It's kind of the last week off before the season starts. So there will not be a live show this week. I'll be flying, unfortunately, during that Wednesday, so it's going to be tough. We will be back in full force next week. We're going to have our Wednesday show. We're going to have a game preview with Mark Bergen over at Believe in Steelers, and we're going to have probably another show squeezed in somewhere just because we're going to be getting hyped about this game. So can't wait. Excited. Time for the real meaningful stuff to start happening here in Atlanta and in the NFL. And shout out to all the patrons and YouTube members joining our fantasy leagues. We're going to start drafting those on Wednesday. So it's been a long road to get the league set up. Thanks to everyone for your patience, and I appreciate everyone playing with us this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining me here on Dirty Birds and Brews. We'll be back next week. Until then, enjoy your last football NFL-free week, essentially, for a very, very long time, because the 2024 season's right around the corner. Until next time, guys, thanks so much.